and to demonstrate that this is not just Labour's Britain's conversation, the Labour Broadcasting Corporation. Let's take Alan, because Alan from Balham, I gather you are a Tory, and I'd be interested to hear your views on the final two, and then I'm sure you're going to metaphorically kick me in the shins as a Labour MP as well. So, Alan, good to talk to you.
Not at all. I wish you were an electable alternative. I truly do, but you're not. So let's talk about the two candidates. I'm disappointed because Penny Mordaunt didn't make it into the final two. Mm-hmm. I think she'd make an outstanding Prime Minister. She has charisma. She's got something about her that I like on a personal level. She's not tarnished by being in the cabinet with Boris. Now, when Boris was first elected, I thought we had an outstanding Prime Minister. I really did. Unfortunately, Boris, I lost my mother, not to COVID, but to cancer in 2020. And myself and my brother were not able to carry our mother into the chapel. We had to see her wheeled in on a trolley, and only 30 people were allowed to attend the service. So for me, that didn't sit too well with me when I found out about all the parties in Downing Street. And I was very disappointed with his arrogance, to be honest with you. I do think he did a lot for the country. I truly do. I think he does have a lot of good qualities, but those good qualities, unfortunately, are outweighed by his bad qualities. Yeah. Now, let's address so out of the final two, for me, I'd say Rishi Sunak.
And what leads you to Rishi Sunak over Liz Truss?
Rishi Sunak, well, Liz Truss is an unknown quantity. She didn't have the courage to stand down when she should have done. She stayed in her position. Some might argue, as Foreign Secretary, with everything that's going on, that was probably a wise thing to do. But she stuck with him to the very end, and unfortunately, Boris had to go. That's the way I feel. For me, Penny Mordaunt was untarnished by the Boris era, for want of a better word. With Rishi got to a point where I think he just thought, I can't do this anymore. The only thing that worries me about him is that there's a bit of a snaky element to him, in the sense that he'd obviously been planning this for a while. Registering the, Rishi. What's the slogan he's using?
Ready for Rishi.
Ready for Rishi, and the domain and everything.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm looking at proven ability, and let's face it, that the man was in the most difficult job during a very difficult time. He gave massive amount of help to business, and when I look back at the alternative and what your party was proposing as Prime Minister. And then we'd have faced a pandemic. We'd have had a Foreign Secretary in Diane Abbott who could barely string two sentences together and doesn't even know what's going on in the real world, let alone this country. We had not a communist or a socialist, probably one of the most dangerous people ever put forward for the office of Prime Minister in Jeremy Corbyn, and an even more dangerous man sitting behind him in the position of Chancellor, as in John McDonnell. Now, that's the issue I have with your leader. He stood beside Corbyn in the shadow cabinet as shadow Foreign Secretary, I think I'm right in saying, and basically, in doing that, for me, has made himself totally and utterly unelectable for the office of Prime Minister. Because when I look at certain MPs in Labour, and I admire some of your MPs, I can't remember his surname, but if you will remember him standing up in the Houses of Parliament before the last general election and saying he will not stand in a general election and put Jeremy Corbyn forward for the office of Prime Minister. He's a West Midlands MP. His first name is Ian.
Ian Austin.
Ian Austin. That's the type of MP I'd vote for. If I lived in his constituency and he was putting himself forward as a candidate for the next general election as an independent, he'd get my votes. That's what I want out of an MP. I want MPs like Johnny Mercer, Ian Austin, people who actually stand for what they truly believe in. And unfortunately, the biggest problem your party's got, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is the fact that you put forward Jeremy Corbyn for the office of Prime Minister, and that is going to damage you for a very long time. And
Yeah, I'd just say a couple of things in response to you there, Alan. And look, people I think know that I was one of the kind of critics of Jeremy Corbyn in his leadership, which doesn't endear me to some people on my own side who absolutely loved Jeremy Corbyn. But I do think that was a big factor in why we lost the last general election. I think the change that Keir Starmer's led in just over 2 years as leader of the Labour Party has made a transformational difference to where the party is now. He's understood why we've lost the last election. He's confronted the Labour Party with those honest choices that we need to make about whether we move ourselves closer to the voters or further away. He's changed a lot of the culture in the Labour Party. You remember we had big problems with anti-Semitism and the Equality and Human Rights Commission issuing an almost unprecedented judgment against the Labour Party. I say almost unprecedented because the only other political party the HRC had acted against previously was the British National Party, which is not the kind of company I'd expect the Labour Party to keep. And Keir Starmer is the person who's led that change. And I hear what you say, that Keir Starmer was in the shadow cabinet. But I'll just sort of share a story. I'm not sure I've shared this publicly before, but putting to one side the fact that 180 MPs did declare no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn early in his leadership, and I think Keir would have been one of them. I remember having a conversation with Keir once, and he was the shadow Brexit secretary and a very important job with all of the negotiations that were going on the biggest issue of the day. And I remember talking to Keir about anti-Semitism and some of the other challenges we had, because I always saw him as one of the reasonable, fair-minded, decent people in the shadow cabinet that I could go to and talk to. And we had quite a robust conversation about his challenges. And Keir said, look, do you think I should resign from the shadow cabinet? Is that what you're saying to me? And I said, oh, no, for goodness sake, don't do that. We absolutely need you in there. We need you to try and make a difference, whether on Brexit or some of the other challenges the Labour Party had. And so in the end, that's, you know, I was one of those MPs that made a different choice under Jeremy Corbyn. I did not serve on the front bench under Jeremy Corbyn or in the shadow cabinet under Jeremy Corbyn. But I really don't judge Keir Starmer in any way harshly or badly for doing so. I think he was one of a number of people who were trying to make a difference, trying to stop the Labour Party from losing a general election, trying to stop the Labour Party from losing its moral compass on issues like anti-Semitism. And it's one of the reasons why when Keir Starmer was elected to the leadership of the Labour Party, I felt confident joining his front bench team, because he's a leader that I had confidence in. And I've got to say, you know, week on week, month on month, my confidence in Keir Starmer and admiration for him as a person, a leader, only grows. And look, I know this is the point at which you start to sound like a, you know, sort of Crawley Bumlick, sort of kissing the backside of your own leader and saying how great he is. But I do think in Keir Starmer we've got a leader who is thoroughly decent, principled, and someone who I believe would make a great Prime Minister for our country. But I recognise we've got more work to do to win people like you back, Alan. Have you ever voted Labour at any point in the past?
I thought about it, and I would have. I thought seriously. In fact, I'm not going to lie. Yes, I did. I voted for. My friends will be horrified, but I voted for Tony Blair. Now there's another issue. Boris Johnson's done a lot of wrong. There's no doubt about it. But if Tony Blair can get a standing ovation for when he resigned, a man who brought us into an illegal war. I'm a Northern Ireland veteran. I served in the British Army and served in Northern Ireland. A man who basically signed an agreement with Sinn Féin that left British Army veterans open to prosecution, while IRA members were given basically a free ticket from ever being prosecuted. But more importantly with Tony Blair, the lies that he told to bring us into that Iraq war. If he can get a standing ovation, then I think your party has got a lot to answer for not at least recognising and showing respect to someone who brought us through, a pandemic, who has really stood up to the job in terms of Ukraine. Yeah, he tells lies. Yes, he's arrogant. But you know what? Do me a favour. If Tony Blair could get a standing ovation, then at least you could have done is shown some respect to the office of Prime Minister, if not the person himself. On your point of where you've raised, and I'm conscious of time, in relation to Keir Starmer, I will say this. I have no doubt you'll get your Labour voters back. The people who voted en masse that Jeremy Corbyn could never represent this country. That's why you lost so many Labour voters at the last election. And Boris Johnson thanked the Labour voters for lending them his vote because he was aware that they probably never vote again. He rescued us from Corbynism, and that's one thing I'm grateful to Boris Johnson from.
Well, Alan, thank you very much. Thank you very much for calling. And I just, on that point about not giving Boris Johnson a standing ovation this week in Parliament, as we've had a bit of conversation on this on LBC this week, I think we would have looked like absolute hypocrites if one week we've talked about Boris Johnson's appalling moral failures as a Prime Minister and the next week we're giving a big standing ovation. But look, Alan, thank you very much. That was really interesting listening to you and proof positive that we will have callers listening in where I disagree with so much of what was said there. But you know, this is why I love tuning in and listening to LBC and why it's a privilege standing in for James O'Brien this morning.